Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava, page 21a, starting at the top of the page, with the words Kehedyot Midas Dami. It is similar to an action involving non-sacred property belonging to an ordinary person, which was performed with the owner's knowledge and against his wishes. This is because consecrated property belongs to the Almighty, and it is therefore meaningless to speak of a situation where the owner is unaware of what is being done. Consequently, anyone who derives benefit from consecrated property is in violation of the prohibition of misuse, but it cannot be inferred from this that one who resides in another's courtyard without his knowledge must pay him rent. Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda sent a message to Mari Bar Mar, saying, raise the following dilemma before Rav Huna. Does one who resides in another's courtyard without his knowledge need to pay him rent or not? In the meantime, before he was able to respond to the question, Rav Huna died. I wonder if this is the last question that Rav Huna received. Interesting. You can make a connection between living in someone else's courtyard and Rav Huna. At any rate, Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, said to him, in response to the question that was asked of his father, Rabba bar Rav Huna, so did my father, my master, say in the name of Rav, he does not need to pay him rent. And also, he stated another halacha, one who rents a house from Ruvain must pay rent to Shimon. The Gemara is called Shimon. What does he have to do with this? The Gemara explains this is what he's saying. He says he discovered the house. If it is discovered that the house he rented did not actually belong to him, but rather it was Shimon's, he must pay rent to Shimon. The Gemara questions this statement. Did Rav Huna state two contradictory halachot? On the one hand, he says that one who resides in a courtyard without the owner's knowledge does not need to pay rent. But on the other hand, he says that if it is discovered that the true owner of a rented house was someone else, and therefore the tenant was living in another's courtyard without the owner's knowledge, he is obligated to pay him rent. The Gemara resolves this difficulty. The second halacha, which stated that he is obligated to pay rent, is referring to a courtyard that stands to be rented out, while the halacha, which stated that he is not obligated to pay rent, is referring to a courtyard that does not stand to be rented out. I wonder if they're just making it up on the spot. Like if they come to a contradiction, they think of a case where it doesn't apply and then say it right there. It wasn't like from before, and it's like they're just making it up right now. I wonder. Because it's always like, this is a case where it doesn't apply. So anyway, I'm not sure. But at any rate, it was also stated that Rabbi Chia bar Avin says that Rav says, and some say Rabbi Chia bar Avin says that Rav Huna says, one who resides in another's courtyard without his knowledge does not need to pay him rent, and one who rents a house from the residents of the city must pay rent to the owners. The Gemara is puzzled. Owners? What do they have to do with this? The case concerns one who rents a property from the residents of the city. In other words, the house is public property. The Gemara explains this is what he said. If it is discovered that the house did have owners and was not public property, the renters must pay rent to those owners. The Gemara wonders about this. Did he state two contradictory halachot? The Gemara answers this second halacha, which stated that he is obligated to pay rent, is referring to a courtyard that stands to be rented out. Well, that halacha, which stated that he does not need to pay rent, is referring to a courtyard that does not stand to be rented out. Rav Sehora says that Rav Huna says that Rav says, one who resides in another's courtyard without his knowledge does not need to pay him rent, because it is stated, desolation remains in the city, and the gate is stricken unto ruin. Isaiah 24:12. In other words, a house that is not lived in will collapse at some point due to neglect. Consequently, one who lives inside an otherwise uninhabited house is providing a service to the homeowner, and as he maintains the house and prevents it from falling apart. Mar bar of Ashi said, "I saw this ruin, and it gores like an ox." In other words, it's devastating. Rav Yosef said a similar idea: a home that is lived in is settled and safeguarded, while a home that is not lived in has no one to look after and maintain it. The Gemara asks, "My Beinahu, what is the difference between Rav and Rav Yosef?" Between them the difference between them is with regard to a house that the homeowner uses to store wood and straw. That's obviously not lived in. Okay, the Gemara relates there was a certain man who built a mansion on a garbage heap belonging to orphans, and Rabbi Nachman confiscated his mansion from him, as he did not pay the owners of the property. The Gemara asks, shall we say that Rav Nachman holds that one who resides in another's courtyard without his knowledge must pay him rent? The Gemara rejects this. No, there is no proof taken from this case because it was a unique situation. In that case, Carmenians, nomadic tribes, were initially living on the property, and they would pay the orphans a small amount for the use of the land. And when this man built his mansion, he removed the Carmenians from there. Rav Nachman had said to the man who built the mansion, "Go and appease the orphans with regard to their lost income." But he did not pay attention to the ruling. Therefore, Rav Nachman confiscated his mansion from him. The Mishnah teaches, under what circumstances does the owner of the animal pay for the benefit of his animal derived? Rav said, where the animal turns its head to reach the food, but the animal itself is standing completely inside the public domain and eats while standing there. And Shmuel said, even if it is standing in the public domain and turns its head to eat from the food placed at the side of the public square, its owner is also exempt. The Gemara asks, but according to the opinion of Shmuel, how can you find a case in which the owner is liable to pay for the damage caused when the animal ate from food placed at the side of the public square, as indicated in the Mishnah? The Gemara answers, for example, when an animal leaves the public square and goes and stands at the side of the public square and eats the food stored there. In that case, the owner certainly pays for what it damaged, as this area is comparable to the property of the injured party. And there are those who teach this halacha as an independent dispute and not as an explanation of the Mishnah. If an animal is standing in the public domain and turns its head to eat from food placed at the side of the public square, Rav says its owner is liable, and Shmuel says its owner is exempt. The sages ask, but according to the opinion of Shmuel, with regard to that which was said in the Mishnah, that its owner pays for what it damaged, how can you find a case in which its owner will be liable? The Gemara answers, for example, when an animal leaves the public square and goes and stands at the side of the public square and eats the food stored there. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak raises an objection to this explanation in Rav's opinion. The Mishnah says that if the animal ate produce from the entrance of the store, its owner pays for the benefit that the animal derived, as the status of a store entrance is like that of public domain. How can you find these circumstances? It is obvious that the discussion in this case concerns an animal that turns its head from the public domain to the entrance of the store, and the master says that the owner of the animal pays for the benefit that the animal derived. Evidently, for the benefit that the animal derived, yes, this is what the owner pays, but he does not pay for that which is damaged. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak raised the objection. Okay. 5-minute warning. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak raised the objection, and he resolved it by explaining that the case in the Mishnah is one where a store is located on a corner and it is situated in a way that some of the produce there would be an animal's path, and it turns the corner, and therefore the animal would not need to turn its head away from the public domain in order to eat the produce. Someone once said that Tui Boulevard in Chicago, West Rogers Park, needs a good produce market. There are those who it would do well. A good produce market would do well in Tui, in the Jewish area. Yigid Amri, there are those who state a different explanation of a dispute between Rav and Shmuel in a case where it turns its head to eat from the sides of the public square. Everyone agrees that its owner is liable to pay the full cost of damage. When they disagree is regard to one who allocates space from his property to the public domain. And this is what is stated. Rav says they taught only in the case where the animal turns its head. They taught that one's liable only in the case when the animal turns its head, but if one allocated some space from his property and added it to the public domain and the damage happened there, the owner is exempt, as that area is treated as part of the public domain. And Shmuel says even if he allocates space from his property and adds it to the public domain, the owner of the animal is liable, as the damage took place in an area with the legal status of private property. The Gemara suggests, shall we say that they disagree with regard to the question of damage classified as pit, that one dug inside one's own domain and then declared the area ownerless? Rav, who says that the owner of the animal is exempt for eating the produce placed in an area that the owner added to the public domain, holds that if one digs a pit or creates an obstacle that can cause damage within his own property, and he then declares his property to be ownerless, he is liable for any damage that is caused by the pit, as now that is in the public domain, he bears the responsibility for it. Similarly, the produce is viewed as if it is in the public domain, and the animal's owner is exempt. And Shmuel, who says that the owner of the animal is liable for eating the produce placed in an area that the owner added to the public domain, holds that if one digs a pit within his own property and then he declares his property to be ownerless, he is exempt, as he dug the pit when the property was his. Similarly, the produce is viewed as if it is in the property of the injured party, and the animal's owner is liable. The Gemara rejects this. Rav could have said to you, actually, I will say to you,